Welcome to Classic 4x4, the podcast for and by truck and 4x4 enthusiasts. I'm your host and founder of Classic 4x4, Chris Picconi. Please make sure to review and subscribe to the podcast on your listening platform. Follow and like Classic 4x4 on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our channel and check out our episodes on YouTube. Also, please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help you sell your truck or 4x4. Visit classic4x4.com for more details. Thank you for listening and enjoy the episode. Well, hello, Classic 4x4 podcast listeners. I'm your host, Chris Picconi, and this is the third quarter 2024 Collector Truck and 4x4 Market Update and Outlook episode. And joining us today as a guest co-host who's joined us a few times in the past, especially for the Market Update episodes, is Brian Ellis, the CEO and co-founder of Fourbie Exchange. What's going on, Brian?
Hey, man. How you doing?
I am well. I really appreciate you joining us again today. For all our listeners out there, you'll start to notice that I'm going to do truck and 4x4 market update and outlook episodes every quarter now. That's purely due to popular demand. I can see the downloads on the back end, and we're very fortunate to have an amazing audience that listens to our show in mass. But I got to tell you that the market update episodes, they download and are listened to like 10 times more than the regular interview episodes. So you got to give the people what they want. And I'm going to record them every quarter now. And I like talking about it too.
Love it.
Yep. And you've been a recurring guest on these market update episodes. So hopefully you're willing to join me more often then.
Yeah, man, these are fantastic. I think it's just, we're in such a interesting time of market values and how things are settling out across the spectrum, not just classic trucks and 4x4s, although it's such a great microcosm of the broader circumstances that we're seeing. But absolutely love it. Thank you for the privilege of joining. Let's dig into it.
Yeah. Before we dig into it, just tell us what's going on at Forby. Your co-founders, Garrett, the chief revenue officer. I mean, he's bringing some really cool stuff to the site these days with not only your dealer partners, but your large scale collector and enthusiast, individual clients, like really interesting stuff. I know Joel, who's your other co-founder, the chief technology officer, has some stuff going on where he's building another version of the site. So what's going on, man?
Yeah, it's been a really great quarter. I think we've learned a ton in terms of what the market is asking and demanding. And part of that too is on, to that Joel piece, it's fortifying the marketplace for what the future looks like. A big part of that is content, right? It's enabling a platform that can operate fast and safely for both sides of the users and handle just the massive content that is being required anymore for an individual to sell a car properly and get the maximum value, and then a buyer to confidently buy transact on a vehicle online, right? Belly to belly is highly desirable when it comes to these sales, but so many more people are just so more confident in buying online, so we need to be able to handle that. On the dealer side, absolutely fantastic inventory coming through. Dealers are looking for marketplaces that serve niche focused areas, and they want a place where enthusiasts feel comfortable to shop. So just been a really great journey with some of those sellers and getting their feedback and hearing where we can improve and what they're really looking for and their perspectives of the marketplace as well. So really just an exciting time, and excited over these next couple of weeks and months to roll out some improvements that we think the buyers and sellers are going to really appreciate to make that process a lot faster and smoother.
Awesome. Well, Forby is one of my go-to marketplaces for my client trucks and 4x4s. Especially the highly customized stuff where there's such a thin buyer pool in the first place. You really need to focus on putting those unique and custom trucks and 4x4s in front of those buyers. And when I put them up on Forby, you guys have the eyes. So that's what's unique. It doesn't get lost in, some massive marketplace. It gets the attention it deserves. And So that's always a good thing. You guys are doing great things.
Thank you.
But let's get into it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about we're going to hit on a couple areas today for our listeners. The first thing we're going to talk about is the broader collector vehicle market trends, performance. We're going to dissect some of the data. We're then going to talk about marketplaces. But little change here is I'm not going to talk about marketplaces. Brian's going to talk about
Nice.
marketplaces. Yep.
All right.
And I sat back and I was like, why am I talking about marketplaces? Yes, I have a cool perspective where I'm working with many different marketplaces. I'm choosing which marketplaces to put my client trucks and 4x4s in to effectively sell them. At the highest market value, picking and choosing which trucks belong in which marketplaces, and that placement is huge. But why would I not have the CEO and co-founder of a marketplace himself talk about what's going on in marketplaces? So Brian's going to talk about marketplaces. Then we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and talk about the truck and 4x4 markets, some trends there, what's going on. And then we're going to have a little fun at the end where we're going to talk about what's hot and what's not. So
Yeah.
the truck and 4x4 make and models that are hot right now in the collector market, the ones that are not. And we're going to add a cool little wrinkle in there where we're going to do buy, sell, hold. So when we talk
Love
about
it.
those makes and models and what's hot, what's not, we're going to throw in there what our opinion is to buy them, sell them, or hold them. How's that sound?
Love it. Yeah. Very
Awesome.
cool format. Let's do it.
All right, so let's dig into the broader collector vehicle market. Couple market drivers and trends that we've talked about in the past, but I just want to kind of reiterate things that are just driving the overall collector vehicle market, not specifically the truck and 4x4 market. The first is, and I've talked about this before, the collector vehicle markets are purely driven by generational change, right? They're generations of buyers, right, that fit within a certain age and demographic. Are there are times where they want to buy, and there's times where they want to hold, and there's times where they want to sell, and that inherently impacts the values of these vehicles. So right now, the buyers, the generational buyers in the market right now are that 35 to 55 demographic. What is that 35 to 55 demographic buying? They're buying, mostly 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s vehicles, both cars and trucks, but specifically trucks. The 35 to 55 demographic has an absolutely insatiable appetite for collector trucks and 4x4s, hands down. That's probably the biggest trend I'm seeing out there right now. The market is actually shrinking. To kind of parlay on that, the market is shrinking for early and blue chip collector vehicles. When I'm talking about early vehicles, pre 1970s, the earlier stuff, where that generation collected them, 20 and 30 years ago. They've held them for several years, but now that generation is losing interest. They're sadly dying off, and now they're flooding the market and trying to sell them. That's driving prices down. So the early stuff, that market is shrinking. The buyer pool is shrinking. Inventory is growing. Prices are coming down. Simple supply and demand. More supply, less demand. Prices are always going to come down. The other trend that I'm seeing, which I think is just generational and it's more of an appetite thing, is blue chip vehicles are starting to get soft. We had Monterey recently, back in August. Monterey is a big sale for blue chip vehicles. When I'm talking about blue chip vehicles, like stuff that is very rare, very unique, regardless of age, that really transacts well over 300,000. Most of them are transacting well over 500,000. A lot of them are transacting over $1 million. So those are really the blue chip vehicles. And it's interestingly enough, the generation right now that is buying and actively buying in the markets just isn't really as interested in blue chip vehicles. Not to say they don't have the money. They have the money, but it's, if they're going to spend $500,000, they'd rather build a bespoke, custom, frame off, nut and bolt resto, vehicle that fits their perfect criteria than go out and buy a coach built Duesenberg or something like that. It's I think that's just a generational change where
Yeah.
there's just a different appetite for those vehicles. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think, you look at the 70s and later are that's where the money is. That's where it's coming in. I think, you still are getting transactions happening 50s, 60s, but, in the 80s might be somewhat tough sledding, but that's a little bit of a area where I think you're going to see a lot of growth. 70s are hot. That appeals to such a broad demographic. But I think that 80s market, while historically a little bit lower, I think that's where the punch is. And 90s, and then even early 2000s. Look at something like a first gen Sequoia. That's near and dear to my heart. I love that vehicle, but there's so much value in those early 2000s coming to light.
And also, I can't believe that next year, 2000 model year vehicles will be considered classics, right?
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that freaks me out, man. That just freaks
Yeah.
me out. But that's a whole nother conversation. But we talked about where the market's shrinking. Let's talk about where the market's growing. Another big trend where the market is growing is, like you just said, later and modern collector vehicles post 1970s.
Mhm.
That's really where the market's growing. That 35 to 55 demographic that is driving the market right now. That's what they want. They want the stuff that they saw growing up, looking out the rear of their parents' station wagon, that car or truck that drove by. That's what they're buying. That's where the market is growing. But overall, the theme that you're all going to hear today is I'm very cautiously optimistic on the future of the market. We're going to dig a little bit deeper, but the key metrics are really indicating that the market continues to balance out. Nothing surprising on the high end, nothing surprising on the low end, but that's a good thing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I want to dissect the data. Everybody knows the three key metrics that I follow to really dictate the market and the trends in the market are sell through, average sale price, and dollar volume. Sell through is the percentage of vehicles that go to market and successfully sell. Average sale price is the average sale price of those vehicles that successfully sold in the market, and dollar volume is the total dollar amount of the vehicles that successfully sold in the market. Before I dissect the numbers for July, August, and September, let's kind of recap Q1, get everybody up to speed. First quarter of this year is really when we saw the first signs of the market balancing out. There was a lot of volatility, but we saw a trend start that made me feel comfortable and really showed that the market is stabilizing. And that trend is sell through remaining essentially flat, maybe down a point or two, up a point or two, which means the vehicles that are coming to market are selling through at average levels. Dollar volume increasing, meaning that more vehicles are coming to market, but with flat sell through, still meaning they're selling. But this is the big indicator and the big part of the trend that makes me happy, and which makes me see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel and the market really is balancing out on our way to a good place and some appreciation, which is average sale prices are coming down. Right. So, people always say, Chris, well, average sale prices are coming down. Why is that a good thing? It's a good thing because when sell through is relatively flat, dollar volume is growing, meaning there's more vehicles, more inventory coming to market. It's selling through at average levels, right? But average sale prices are coming down. That is why the other two metrics are remaining consistent or strong. And the reason average sale prices are coming down is pure and simple. It's because sellers are becoming more realistic. They're realizing that the market is not 2021, 2022. The market has progressed. It's not 21, it's not 22 where, you can throw anything against the wall. It's going to do a crazy number, but it's also not 2023 where the market was tumultuous, to say the least. So that tells us that the market's stabilizing, average sale prices coming down means that sellers are becoming more realistic on the value of their vehicles and meeting buyers' expectations. So that trend of sell through staying flat, dollar volume growing, and average sell price coming down is going to be a recurring theme throughout this episode. But that is a good thing because it tells us that the market is balancing out, and the market has to balance out before it can start to appreciate. So I think the worst is behind us. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you hit on two really big things. One is that this isn't a bloodbath, right? This is stabilization, and that's good for the market. Everybody wins when there's stabilization coming in. The other side, or the other component that you hit on too, is the valuations. As I talked to some other marketplaces, that's been, and you, Chris, you and I've spoken about this a ton. It's that realistic valuation and what is the actual net worth of a vehicle. We started to do valuation reports for private sellers over the last couple of months. And I think overall, I don't think we've sent a single valuation report that somebody was getting more than they thought they were going to get. However, I do think there's an appreciation for understanding what the data is actually suggesting, and bringing that realistic view to the market. And I do think that sellers, even though they're not getting the dollars that they were seeing in 21, 22, are realistic. They are feeling that the market is has spoken, and that the data supports reasonable prices, and everybody wins when that happens.
Yep, couldn't agree anymore. I like where that trend is going. We first saw that, really in first quarter of this year, though the metrics, the three core metrics, were volatile. That trend started. That trend continued in the second quarter of this year. With a lot less volatility. All the metrics were relatively flat, unassuming, nothing crazy. But again, that supports that the market is balancing out. So a great sign for the second quarter. Anybody that listened to the semi-annual or the semi-annual market update that I did back in June, or I should say July. I was excited about the June numbers because the June numbers were the first time in almost 18 months where all three key metrics, sell through, dollar volume, and average sell price, actually appreciated. Nothing crazy, a point or two, nothing wild, but it appreciated, which in my opinion, may have marked the bottom of the market. The bloodbath of 2023 is over. We're stabilizing. And I think June of this year kind of, hey, obviously, hindsight's always 2020. We'll know in another 12 months if that is the case. But if I was to call it, I would think June really kind of was the bottom of the collector vehicle market. Let's go into the third quarter. There's a couple trends here that are interesting before I dive into the data. The first is the trend we continue to talk about, which we started to see in Q1. We saw again in Q2 with less volatility. We're seeing it again in Q3. Makes me optimistic. We'll dig into the data though, where we continue to show signs of the market balancing out and really sellers becoming more realistic to buyers' expectations. Again, this is evidenced by sell through being flat or increasing and average sell prices decreasing. So let's talk about the July metrics. Sell through year over year was down about 3% to 62%. Again, that variance of, 5 points down, 5 points up in my world is just kind of flat. It's nothing remarkable, though we regressed 3%, year over year. Again, 3% is nothing crazy. It's still sitting at about 62%, which is still a little below average. We want to see a higher sell through in a healthier market, but those times will come. Average sale price in July was down 11% to $40,568. Again, not a bad thing. Sellers are becoming more realistic to buyers' expectations. And dollar volume in July year over year was down 7% to $267.6 million, which again, when you're talking about, almost $270 million, a 7% regression isn't anything that is there's nothing to worry about there when you're talking about that type of dollar volume. So July's key performance indicators, really, they were unremarkable. They were flat, which again, this is good. This is not a bad thing. We need to have this period of time in order to bring us to the good times. August metrics were a little weird because August metrics were dominated by are always dominated by the Monterey auctions. Plus, that also threw off September's metrics because we had some sales that usually happen in September that either didn't happen or happened in August. So they were in August numbers. So August sell through was up 2%. That's a good sign. But again, that variance is nothing crazy. 2% is in my book is pretty flat. So sell through was up to 65% year over year. Average sale price was down 10% to $104,389, right? And again, August tends to have a much higher average sale price because of Monterey, and Monterey has a lot of blue chip sales, big dollar, half a million, $1 million, in some cases $2 million plus sales. So that kind of throws off the average sale price. But down 10% again, that is something that we should take note of. And that, I think, also, like we talked about and alluded to before, shows us that the demand for blue chip vehicles is not what it used to be. There is demand, but buyers are willing to pay a little bit less. But dollar volume was up in August to up 4.9%. So up about 5%, which is something to take note of, to about $610.4 million. Again, big number because of Monterey. Monterey transacts a lot in August. But, the average sale price decrease, like I said, is attributable to blue chip collector vehicles just becoming less desirable by the next generation of collectors. But I really think Monterey was in line with the common trend that we're seeing, where dollar volumes increasing, sell through was flat and flat to increasing, and average sale price decreasing. Again, that trend that we like. Let's talk about September. September's metrics were a little wonky this year. Reason being is we had 3 sales that just didn't take place in September. So one of them, which was Barrett Jackson, usually has a New Orleans sale in September. They didn't even do that sale this year, right? The other thing is the other sale that took place, that usually takes place in September, actually took place in August, which is the Auburn sale, the worldwide Auburn sale, which is a really interesting sale. I got a chance to watch it this year, but that usually takes place in September, but it took place on August 31st of this year. And then there's another big sale in Europe, which I forget about, but I don't really focus on Europe too much, or outside the US. So there were 3 big sales that just didn't happen in September this year, which really threw off September's metrics. And you're going to see that in the numbers. So sell through year over year in September was down 1% to 63%. Again, completely unremarkable. Average sale price was down 14% to $40,220. Again, part of that trend, not a bad thing. Sellers are becoming more realistic with buyers' expectations. But really, the metric that was really thrown off by those sales not happening is the dollar volume. Dollar volume was down 22% to $227.8 million. So down 22% seems like a lot, but when you factor in that those 3 sales just didn't happen in September of 2024, but they happened in September of 2023, that right there is 20% of the inventory and volume. So I'm not really worried. I'm not really worried about that. But again, flat sell through and decreasing average sales price is in line with the common trend. Couple trends that I have in the broader collector vehicle market, and my outlook is, I again sound like a broken record here, flat to increasing sell through, decreasing average sell price. It has to happen. It's happening. This is what gives us light in the end of the tunnel that the market is going to get better. Sellers are just becoming more realistic with values. Flat to increasing sell through and increasing dollar volume. That's a good thing. Inventory is growing, but enough buyers and sellers are coming together. So it's a healthy market. 2024, I believe if I had my crystal ball, I believe 2024 throughout the fourth quarter will continue to balance out between buyers and sellers on our way to a good place in 2025. The market has legs right now throughout the remainder of 2024, and this is just part of the cycle. I think we have bottomed out and we are kind of just bouncing on the bottom to appreciating right now. What are your thoughts in that space?
Yeah, I think that data is really interesting to start with, Chris. One is because the underlying data itself, because I think that the truck and four by four market is extremely resilient within those numbers. So looking at the broader collector car space, I think that there are some markets that are working a little bit differently, but I do think that the truck and four by four market has just been so much more resilient than the numbers really suggest. I do agree that, I think you were talking a little bit earlier, looking at the subsects of those markets too, those 60s and 70s, I do think are going to continue to go up. I think that you're going to see some of the purpose built stuff really continue to bring those numbers to a different spot. So even looking within the numbers themselves, I think that warrants conversation as well, because I think that not every vehicle is built the same way, not just the market, but the subsects of each market too. So it'll be interesting to see where they continue to head. But overall, again, I agree that stabilization is where we are, and that's a good thing for everybody.
It's just part of the market cycle, man. We're
It
not we're
is.
not going up, we're
Yeah.
not going down, but that's a good thing because when you're not going down, you're not going up, that means you're on your way to up, right?
Yep.
Not on your way to down, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and
So
I think you have to zoom out a little bit too, right? It's year over year, absolute critical metric for us to evaluate and understand recency. But it's just been a crazy, weird 4 or 5 years, and I think just continuing to zoom out and look at the broader market differently than we have, I think, historically over the last couple of decades, I think is warranted here as well.
agreed. Cool. So let's turn it over to you in marketplaces. Tell us what's going on in marketplaces. I
Yeah,
obviously everybody has listened to my opinions. I talk about marketplaces all the time. How you
yeah,
present a vehicle is very important, but more importantly, where you present it. Marketplaces. Not every marketplace is created equal. Some are amazing. Some are just shady AF. Right.
yeah.
And we've talked about that in the past. So what's going on in marketplaces right now?
Yeah, I think just like you, Chris, I'm a nerd about the format for marketplaces and how network effects actually work. I grew up thumbing through my dad's vintage Hemming Motors news. I watched as my dad would pull me out to go to live auctions. Right, we would head down to Barrett Jackson or whatever and enjoy those live auctions. And then was there as bring a trailer, came to market, read the blog, saw marketplaces really evolve online, but we're at this inflection point, right, where online automotive marketplaces they've just lagged compared to other marketplaces, right? So looking at something like, I think the shoe market actually does a really phenomenal job. So something like a StockX, there's a venue booking marketplace called Tag Venue. They've done a phenomenal job, and even, I hate to say it, but even like an Amazon, right, bringing that innovation to market is really, really important. And I think that automotive marketplaces are served well when they evaluate those trends more broadly than just automotive. It's very easy to be siloed within automotive, but we have to look a little bit more broadly. I think it's an interesting trend to see something like Cars and Bids, the MB market, P-Car market, JDM Supply, these kind of niche or these focused marketplaces come to be. And but again, then I think that that's the next evolution, right? It's the niche focus where we're not going a mile wide, we're going a mile deep. We're really ingratiating ourselves with these communities. We're being a part of these communities and being a solution for these communities. I think that innovation for these marketplaces right now are extremely front end loaded versus the back end loaded. We need to be focusing on better valuation support, better listing content, demanding better content from the sellers so that that the buyers are confident in what they're getting. That has taken place. Credit to Bring a Trailer to raising the bar for that premium inventory. But we have to get away from the hodgepodge of inventory listed on and aspire for more than a premium Craigslist post, right? We really need to bring what the buyer is looking for, by way of convenience, by way of transparency, and by way of security. And I think that that's the next shift, as marketplaces try to find their identity. We're lacking, or a lot of marketplaces are lacking focus and discipline. I have to give credit to Cars and Bids for sticking to their guns and saying, this is the era that we're going to focus on, and trying to find different ways to appeal to that community. Um, by way of security, I appreciate Bring a Trailer has the Armchair Mafia coming through and identifying, fraudulent bids or errors like that. But that's not, security is not as inherent to the platform. It's, yes, I'll take that, I'll take a look at the title. We need to elevate the game for security and making sure that these are legitimate buyers and sellers engaging on the platform. Data transparency has continued. Chris, all the numbers that you're sharing is information that a lot of end users can get in some capacities. There is a lot of data available, but it is a dual-edged sword, right? We need to focus on the veracity of that data and making sure that buyers and sellers know exactly what they're getting. I think the other point too is that the incremental costs that are coming to be, right? I think that there is some sort of fatigue as you see there's incremental costs for photography and for shipping and X, Y, and Z, right? So it's how are you making the online buying process, as you are elevating the game, still approachable to sellers with good inventory. So I think that that's part of your inflection points, right? It's security, it's transparency, and it's that convenience all in one. And as we're looking at, to your point earlier, a new generation of buyer who is willing to engage online and wanting and asking to transact online, how do we offer that, right? And I think that there's a continued focus on innovation for something between a standard classified listing and an auction, right? So you're balancing frictionless, you're balancing speed, and you're balancing control with transparency and security. I think you're also going to continue to see the rise of intermediaries. So the rise of classic 4x4, right? Who can offer sellers a gateway to approach the marketplace without the hassle, right? You offer such a great service, a plug, but it's such a great service to somebody who can engage remotely. They have the convenience of a consignment shop, but they also still have that control that they need as a seller. So I think we're going to continue to see a rise of intermediaries, and marketplaces are going to have to react accordingly, right? How do we accommodate properly for an intermediary to come in, whether that's an inherent service that a marketplace is offering, or it's enabling intermediaries like you to help bridge that gap. And then again, I think it's about a deeper focus within the niche, right? So it's being ingrained within that community. It's finding ways to provide that community additional value, and it's being that marketplace expert to help make sure that values are appropriate, to help make sure that vehicles are properly presented. Because especially in our space, we do handle a lot of expedition vehicles or heavily modified vehicles, and sellers want the right price for the modifications they've brought in. I understand that that's part of the valuation discussion, but you're not going to get that premium price or even close to it without that transparency. I need to see what the shocks look like. I need to see the condition of those wheels. These all factor in to the premium price that you're asking me for. So I think that's something that we've continued to look for, is how do we make sure that the vehicles that are specialty get that specialty treatment. And I think a lot of marketplaces right now are serving to a common denominator. And I think that that's great. I think that there's ways that we elevate the entirety of that bar, right? But it's how do you focus on the niche and make sure that that content is applicable and bringing up the premiumness of that inventory. So I think we're just at a really fascinating inflection point. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 12 months as marketplaces continue to ask themselves those questions. But I think it's not just making sure that we understand the automotive space, but it's also about evolving uh, beyond automotive, right? Thinking about what makes marketplaces tick and what are the modern network effects to make buying and selling online an efficient process.
I couldn't agree anymore to parlay on your comment regarding online marketplaces. And it's no secret that online marketplaces is where a vast majority of the automotive transactions, especially collector vehicle
Yep.
transactions, are taking place. They continue to grow. That vertical continues to grow. It continues to surpass live in person event style. Auctions, the Meekums, the Barrett Jacksons, the worldwide stuff like that. It continues to eclipse those live event style auctions. But
Mhm.
the biggest variable with online marketplaces, though they're growing, it's where all the transactions are happening. It's not where the big dollar transactions
Exactly.
are
Right.
happening. And I think the disconnect you talked about, where presentation and how those vehicles are presented and getting it in front of the right buyers and giving those buyers a reason to pay a premium, is what the event style premium in lane, in person auctions and marketplaces do really well, which is where the online marketplaces, a lot of it's still dependent on the sellers. The sellers aren't using intermediaries like myself or other third parties to present their vehicles correctly, or even worse, not presenting them in the correct marketplace. So I couldn't agree anymore with you. If the online marketplace space is going to continue to grow, it's got to and really harness those big dollar transactions.
Yeah.
It has to increase the caliber of its content and how it presents vehicles out in the marketplace. And sellers need to understand that, pure and simple.
Couldn't agree
Um,
more. Yeah. And you
Other thing
absolutely.
is transparency. Back to online, one thing that's unique is we didn't have as much, 5-10 years ago, we didn't have transparency in a lot of vehicle marketplaces
Yeah.
pricing, and especially the collector vehicle market. Almost everything was happening in classifieds,
Mhm.
where it was an off market or a gray market sale,
Yeah.
which still dominates the
Caveat emptor. Yeah.
majority of the
Right.
transactions, but
Right.
you didn't know what those vehicles were selling for, right? You had
Right.
no idea. Now, transparency, you can see, when I do a valuation for a client, they say, oh, I have XYZ vehicle. No problem. Let me find the 6 to 10 most relevant vehicles that are comparable that have traded in the past 90 days. Worst
Right.
case scenario, maybe I have to go out 120 days, right,
Right.
to do the valuation. But that was something that didn't even exist 5 years ago. So transparency, like you said, is good because it helps you value and understand the market. It's bad where if you're not going to market correctly, presenting a vehicle correctly, and you're not effectively selling through, it's devaluing your vehicle. And I'll use an example that I've been read about recently. Have you been following that 65 or Ford Mustang Shelby GT350 that's come to market
Wow.
unsuccessfully like 4 times in the
What a
past?
story. Yeah,
Yo,
absolutely. Not our bread and butter, but it's I think indicative of so much more. But yeah, that's wild, man.
and that story, to give it to our listeners, like, I've been following this, and it's insane. This is an amazing example of, yes, online marketplaces are great, but presenting a vehicle correctly in the correct marketplace is crucial, which is what I do as a broker, as an expert intermediary. But and I do think we're going to see a lot of growth in my space. I've worked on several off-market transactions with specialty brokers recently, that are high caliber, and that are transactions that are well above what the transparent market is transacting at. So I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of value add, but that's a whole different conversation. But back to this 65 Shelby GT350. This thing came to market. It wasn't presented that great. Had some like okay pictures, not a lot of detail. Had the bring a trailer, the bring a
Right.
trailer boilerplate description of it, which does no justice to any
Right.
vehicle, let
Right.
alone a 65 Shelby Mustang GT350.
Right.
So it showed up on Bring a Trailer in January of 2023. The market was not that great at the time. It high bid, no sale at $325,000, right? The seller and Bring a Trailer agreed to bring it back on to Bring a Trailer in July of 2023. Again, the market wasn't great at that period of time, but that $325,000 transaction, that no sale, or I should say it wasn't even a transaction, that $325,000 high bid, no sale is now memorialized. It's transparent. Everybody can see it out there. So now you've pretty much set the high bar, right? So when this vehicle came back to market 6 months later in July of 2023, again on the same marketplace, right? The seller did not learn their lesson the first time. It came and high bid again, no sale at $295,000. So we went from $325,000 in January
Hmm.
to $295,000
Yeah.
in
6
July.
months. Yeah. Right.
Yes, right. And in my opinion, again, this wasn't the right marketplace for the vehicle wasn't presented very well, and it wasn't the right marketplace to get max dollars anyway, right? So, but at this point, the seller now has kind of learned their lesson a little bit and is like, hey, maybe Bring a Trailer isn't the right marketplace. Let me bring it to a in lane, in person event style auction, which they brought it to Mecum. So in May of this year, they brought it to Mecum Indy, right? Mecum Indy is not a Hallmark sale. It's more of a regional sale. The Hallmark sales, though Mecum is the right place to get big dollars for this vehicle,
Yeah.
Indy is not the best place, in my opinion. Like, you could have done Florida, you could have done Arizona, you could have done Monterey, but Indy, whatever. Sellers will never realize that, they if they don't have the information, they don't have an advisor, an intermediary like myself, that a marketplace will just, especially for a big dollar car, will just throw it against the wall and hope it sticks.
Sure.
You're paying the fee, like,
Right.
in hopes it just sells, right?
Right.
Which at this point, for the first two sales, Bring a Trailer enabled them, allowed them to do it, right? Now Mecum, it's going to Mecum. So Mecum, Indy, May of this year, this truck or this car, this GT350 goes across the block and it does 340,000. Again, another high bid, no sale. So the right marketplace, but it didn't sell.
Yeah.
So which tells me, number one, the seller is unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
The value was there, but also could it have done more money if they didn't taint the market with those two previous no sales at BAT? Probably. If they had gone to Mecum, Florida, Arizona, or Monterey right out of the gate, would they have probably done the number they wanted? Yes, but unfortunately, they put it in the wrong marketplace twice. By the time it got to the right marketplace, there was already data that showed that the buyers weren't interested in paying. It held the value of the vehicle down. So then, you ready? This seller goes back to the well again and goes to Bring a Trailer again last week, right? So this vehicle has now, in the past year, or a little over a year, 18 months, has gone to market 4 times, 3 times on Bring a Trailer, once in Mecum. So again, what do you think happened when this auction closed last week for this vehicle? Just what do you think happened, Brian?
I don't think they fared much better.
No, they did not fare much better because they've tainted the market on this
Right.
vehicle.
Yeah.
Didn't enlist a professional and advisor, it just
Yeah.
this vehicle, I hate to say it, just the seller has made every wrong move they possibly could. So last week, this 65 Shelby Mustang GT350 for the third time on BAT, which again is the wrong marketplace for this vehicle in the first place.
Right.
High bid, no sale at $247,000. So
Nice.
talk about transparency. If
Yeah.
you go to market and you don't sell through, guess
Exactly.
what? It taints the market for your vehicle. The chances that this vehicle will ever sell anywhere where it should sell are slim to none. I mean, it's sad, but honestly, there's nobody to blame but the seller. They presented the vehicle incorrectly and they put it in the wrong marketplaces. But now, after a seller, has all this, these unsuccessful sales, then they realize, oh, maybe I should enlist an advisor, a trusted advisor, an intermediary, a broker, a real high caliber specialty broker to help me out. The problem is, guys like myself, now that the market's tainted, we won't even take vehicles
Yeah,
like
no
this.
way.
Yeah,
Right.
because there's no opportunity for us to sell them at market value because the seller has already tainted the market, right? So I'm not taking something like that. I'm going to tell you, hey, no problem, I'll take it, but I'm not going to take, obviously your reserve was well over $340,000. I don't even think I would take it at $100,000 less than that. You've tainted the market so
Yeah.
badly. So
Right.
all of you out there, if there's one thing you can take away from that, this seller's missteps with this GT350, it's if you have a big dollar car and any vehicle over $25,000 in general, some vehicles 20,000, and you want to get the right market value for it, you need to present it correctly in the right marketplace. If you don't know how to do that, which the average enthusiast doesn't know how to do that, make sure you enlist a expert advisor, broker like myself, somebody that's a specialist that can make sure that this doesn't happen so that you do get market value for your vehicle. That's a crazy story. I mean, it's sad.
Yeah.
I hate when that happens, but nobody to blame other than the seller.
Yeah,
So
and I think this one gets publicity because of the scale and the eyes on the car, but I think it is indicative of so many different stories. I'm sure a lot of listeners can empathize with somewhat something similar, of seeing similar examples, because sellers are just not. It's the presentation, it's the read of the data, and it is. I agree. It's utilizing intermediaries and advice properly. And when you have platforms that are not quite as invested in, yes, of course they're invested in the sale, but are they invested in educating the seller properly? That's the difference maker. And I think where some of the flop has occurred for this one, unfortunately.
interestingly enough, some of the biggest referral sources recently for me have been the marketplaces themselves.
Mm.
They'll get a submission from an owner, a seller for a vehicle that is of a good market value, and they'll say, hey, they'll look at the iPhone pictures and like the nominal information. They'll say, hey, we'll bring it to market, but you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. You should talk to this intermediary because we'll bring it to market as a marketplace, but we like when these intermediaries bring us vehicles because they're presented correctly, they're honest, they have inspections, they have great creative photography, videography, all the copies written correctly, and it only benefits everybody across the board, not only the seller, who's going to get a larger, a true market value or a higher value for their vehicle, but it also benefits the marketplace because the marketplace wants sell through because that's how they get paid, and they want sell through at a higher market value. So it benefits everybody in the end, right?
100%. And
Yeah.
as a marketplace, selfishly, I'm less concerned with getting the bulk of the inventory, and more interested in having that halo inventory. And when I can work with an intermediary like you who knows the market, knows how to help the presentation, that not only helps that specific seller, that helps the broader marketplace, because now we're bringing more individuals to the platform, who are interested in that vehicle, but also can see some of the other offerings as well. So it's less about nickel and diming about particular services, right? Yes, I want professional photography. Yes, I want great descriptions and details. And yes, I'm more than happy to advise the sellers that come to market and ask for some help. But I'm even happier to refer over or find intermediaries for that seller who fit what they're looking for. We had a similar example as this. We had a guy out in California bring a very customized Cherokee, an XJ, incredibly customized. Was listing it on our platform for in the 30s. I think if we had actually advised him, it would have been a little bit different. Was not getting the traction that he wanted, and a great guy. Don't get me wrong, but then brought it over to Cars and Bids, high bid of like 5 grand. And again, we're happy to take that vehicle back. And he's a good seller. He's a good friend of the platform. But to your point, that data point is now out there, and the high offer is not going to be 39,000 against a $40,000 offer. It's going to be $6,000. So,
Yeah.
you have to be careful, and I think engaging with a realistic advisor is tremendously valuable and helps protect against the downside much more than it hurts the upside. So absolutely fascinating to see. Again, I think it's the rise of the intermediary, and being a friend of the intermediary is going to benefit a lot of these platforms.
Yep. Before we move on to trucks and 4x4s, there's one thing I want to talk about with marketplaces because I'm interested in picking your brain on this, and that's formats. Right? When we
Mm,
talk about formats, there's really before a couple years ago, there was really only two formats. There was the
right.
classified format and the auction format. And now
Mhm,
we're starting to see the buy it, make an offer format come around.
mhm,
I haven't personally, there's been a ton of, I've talked about this a lot. There's been a ton of auction fatigue,
mhm.
especially as the market pulled back last year. Sellers weren't getting the numbers they wanted, buyers weren't successfully buying anything. So it just, they got fatigued and
Yeah.
just stopped. Buyers stop bidding and sellers stop bringing their stuff to auction. I
Mhm.
think that fatigue continues.
Yeah.
I personally, in any of the strategies I've developed, I have not brought a vehicle to market or to auction, man, in probably almost 2 years now, a little
Yeah.
less than 2 years,
Wow.
call it 18 months, just because there hasn't been success. I've had, success, either direct placing with my relationships, which is where a majority of my transactions are happening anyway, or really focusing on classified or make offer marketplaces and
Mhm.
specifically focused captive enthusiast marketplaces like Forby. So what's your thought on the different, I guess, types
Yeah.
of marketplace formats?
Yeah, that's where the magic is right now, and I think that that's where a lot of marketplaces are focusing, wisely focusing their innovation on. Right, it's these hybrid or these in between types of listings that have the premiumness of a auction and offer the same platform validation. Right, we offer a featured listing that sits above the standard classified listing, but it is much more of a vetted inventory by way of making sure that the right ownership is in place right before we even start. But then it's also making sure that we have the right content behind it. So not just photos and videos, but also even just the story and the narrative behind it. Right, not the standard boilerplate. This is a silver car that has this many horsepower. Right, it's let's bring people along for the ride a little bit and really make sure that they're understanding what this vehicle is. In terms of how those mechanisms actually work, again, I think there's so many different formats out there. I've seen an interesting one whereby it's an auction, or you basically place a high bid, and then it goes to auction, and if it doesn't beat that high bid or that initial offer, the initial offer it gets it. So there's just so many different formats that are being out there, and you have to balance right the incentivization for the marketplace to go and provide the format properly, right, without overstressing and overtaxing that individual as well. Because again, I think that is going to end up in a place of fatigue, right? Because it's just going to come across as gouging, and individuals are not going to go for that for very long. We've become very savvy post auction, but I really love these formats, and we continue to identify or shift the ways in which we deliver that featured listing. I think this is ties back to in the beginning when we talked about the innovation on the platform that you're going to see over the next couple of weeks and months, that we're really excited about. But that featured listing, I think there's some folks that are getting elements of it correctly, but it's just the market hasn't really spoken yet of what model is going to be the perfect one, right? So, by way of contrast, I really enjoy and appreciate the Hemmings um, make offer, their featured listing type format. Some of the criticism or some of the feedback that we've heard too is it still offers that transparency of the questions and answers. We love that balance, right? As buyers and sellers, I've personally used that product and love it. I appreciate those questions. It gives me a chance to go out and sell the vehicle, right? But on the other side of it, you have sellers who are not quite as engaged and are not utilizing that properly. And you have the continued tire kicker. So there is that fatigue with that as well. So it's just going to be interesting. I don't think the market has quite settled on what that middle ground is quite yet that offers the balance of premium content, transparency. It offers the security that you know that you're getting the underlying asset from a valid seller that owns the vehicle or has possession of the vehicle. Um, and then you get that sense of control that you don't get for auctions, right? I know what I want to offer that vehicle for, where I've been advised properly, not just to the benefit of the auction platform. So we'll see. I think that middle ground is where the innovation is going to continue to take place for the automotive marketplaces. I don't think we've seen a perfect model quite yet, but we're working on it.
That's cool. And I agree. I think there's that middle ground between the classifieds and the auctions. Don't know what it is yet. I mean, yeah, there's the make offer, which I've had a lot of success with. The make offer, the premium
Yeah,
premium listing premium make offer listing on Forby, also the make offer listing on Hemmings. I've had a lot of success there. Especially recently, it's the best of both worlds, but I still
yeah.
think there's got to be some tweaking and there's going to be some innovation, some ideas there.
Yeah,
But
at $15 a month or whatever it is for a standard listing, we don't have quite the ability to market the listing on a seller's behalf properly. But at a premium price point, it does open up a lot of options. There's a Carfax included or an auto check included, so that offers some validation. But I think what we're looking at and what we talked about a lot is what is that way that we can make this as turnkey as possible for a seller, but also as comprehensive as possible, and at a price point that everybody can live with. So, yeah, again, I think it'll continue to shake out, and we'll see where that goes.
cool. Let's dig into collector trucks and 4x4s
Yeah,
real quick.
let's do it.
I just have a couple trends that I want to talk about. Turn it over to you, see what trends you're seeing in the collector truck and 4x4 markets. And then let's go into what's hot, what's not, buy, sell, hold recommendations. That's going to be a good one. And we're going to end right there. So, what are the trends in the market outlook I have in the collector truck and 4x4 space right now? The first is, again, I've talked about this. We talked about this earlier, but early collector trucks and 4x4s, 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s. It's a shrinking market, primarily due to generational change. There's more downside in that market than
Yeah,
upside. I don't see there being a lot of appreciation in that market. If you own them, you probably want to sell them, or just hold them because you love them.
yeah,
It's
for
purely
passion.
going to continue to be a buyer's market. Prices are not going up. There's way more downside than there is upside there.
Mhm.
On the flip side, later collector trucks and 4x4s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's a growing market, again, attributable to generational change. There's way more upside than there is downside in that market.
Mhm.
There's an immense amount of demand. That demand is growing because of the generational change. I mean, hands down, no question. I see more appreciation than depreciation. Prices are going to go up before they go down.
Mhm.
Um, you know, other big trend, four-wheel drives. They're just more desirable than two-wheel drives. To compound that, most of the early trucks, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and early 60s stuff, they were mostly all two-wheel drives anyway. So you
Right,
kind of have the double whammy. But buyers want four-wheel drives. Not to say that they're using it, they just want a four-wheel drive. They think of a
right,
truck, they want it as a four-wheel drive. And the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s stuff is mostly all four-wheel drive anyway.
right,
Um, when we're talking about pickups, crew cabs are king right now. Everybody wants crew cabs, hands down, because you can throw your family in them. I mean, crew cabs were just basically, manufactured to add more. They were, these utilitarian purpose-built vehicles where you had to, get full crews up logging
right,
roads, with in a pickup truck. Now, people realize, wow, these are convenient. I can have a pickup truck and still fit my family in it and take it for
right,
ice cream or, take it out for dinner. Like that's fun, right?
right,
So crew
right.
cab pickup trucks are where it's at these days.
Mhm.
Where it's not at right now, highly customized trucks, overland vehicles, purpose-built trucks and 4x4s. They're tough. The market's really tough right now. The buyer pool is just so small. They were really popular during COVID, but unfortunately, the COVID effect is over as the world has opened up. People are starting to realize that I don't need this overland vehicle or this highly customized vehicle anymore. It was a fun COVID project, or I was going out into the woods and staying for weeks on end and camping in my truck with my family. But now I can fly to Europe and it's cheap. I can go to the, fly to the Caribbean and it's cheap with my family. Like, and these things are just sitting around and everybody's unloading them on the market, and the markets are just oversupplied.
Right.
Prices are dropping. Days on market are increasing. I really see more downside in this market than I do upside, especially the really highly customized and also overland builds. There was a lot of supply came into the market. There's decreasing demand. There's definitely more downside than there is upside. Other big trend, which we've talked about at length, sellers are finally becoming more realistic with buyers' expectations. It just had to happen to drive the market forward. It's happening. We're going to see upward momentum at some point. I definitely like where the market's at right now. Looking into the crystal ball for Q4 is traditionally slower, but I do anticipate the trend of, dollar volume, being flat to minimal decrease, sell through being flat to maybe increasing, and average sale pricing continuing to decrease. I see that happening, but overall the data is trending in the right direction. I'm very optimistic on the collector truck and 4x4 markets, especially later collector trucks and 4x4s. What's your
Yeah.
opinion there?
I think you're right on. I'd offer a couple caveats. And again, we talked at length in the beginning. This is not a fire sale. This is market stabilization, especially amongst the blue chips, and that's good. Everybody's winning for that. We talked about those 40s and 50s. Completely agree. I think holding on to that at this point is because you love it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're all here for. But the caveat for that too is I do see the Chevy's advanced designs, and even those early F100s that are four-wheel drive, those are killing. We're going to continue to see those do some really good work. The heavily modified, specifically in those 70s, that 70s era, we do see a few of those. It's tough. It's pennies on the dollar for those modifications on a good day, on a great day, on their best day. But it's also, Chris, you and I looked at one that was 70s K10 that was a crawler. And, it's going for below what average market is, because average market right now is a refurbished 70s K10. It's not, a purpose built and modified one. So it is interesting to see. I think that that's the exception within that 70s market, and in general, right? Anything that is purpose built is just going to have a tough time right now, which again, I think is market stabilization more than anything. And as we were talking about earlier, great time to get into the 90s and early 2000s vehicles. There's a lot of great deals out there. There's a lot of low mileage grandma cars that can be picked up and held on to if you can, or appreciated for what it is. So it'll be interesting to see that market mature and if that picks up even more over these next 12 months or so.
Cool. Well, let's get into what's hot, what's not, makes and models, and buy, sell, hold. So I have a list of what's hot. What I'm seeing is hot and doing well in the market right now, and what my buy, sell, hold recommendations are. I'm interested to pick your brain on some of these and see what your thoughts are on
Yeah.
this. So the first is early generation Toyota pickups and Forerunners. When I'm talking about Toyota pickups, the repurposed Hilux body style,
Yep.
which was known in the rest of the world as Hilux. The
Yep.
Toyota brought them in and started bringing them in 1979 here into the States,
Mhm.
and they just literally called them pickups. Right,
Right.
that's all they call it,
Exactly.
was Toyota
Yeah.
pickups. So
Right.
I'm starting to see these things get hot right now.
Yeah.
They were not that desirable for a long time, and I'm starting to see a lot of them come to market and do some strong numbers. So the first one I'm going to talk about is third gen Toyota pickups, which was 79 to 83. Those are really gaining prominence in the market, and I'm a buy on those. What's your thought?
100%. I mean, that market I think has always been sneakily strong. If you know, you know. But I think that buyer base is just expanding very quickly. I think that you see with a rise of small and compact trucks new. I think that that's creating a much more appreciation for some of the classics that were doing this before it was cool, right? The Mavericks, the Rangers that are coming out now, great trucks, a lot of utility, big fan base, and I think that that's expanding to some of the classics too.
Cool. What are you, a buy, sell, hold on those
Oh, buy,
third gen 79 to
buy. If you
83
see it, I'm
pickups?
walking through the grocery store parking lot, and if I see one, I'm calling that guy. The
Awesome.
buy. Yeah,
So let's move on to fourth gen pickup, Toyota pickup, which was 84 to 88. Those things appreciated really rapidly. Like they
yes,
came out of nowhere and
yeah,
went from doing, five, six, $7,000 to the ones with under 100,000 miles doing 25, 30 grand. Like I'm talking overnight. They got a lot of recognition real quick. So,
yeah,
um, I love those. They appreciated really, really quickly. So I'm a little split on buy and hold, right?
yeah,
If it's over 100,000 miles, the value on those vehicles really, because they lasted forever. A lot of them had
right.
the 22R, the
Yep,
22RE, like,
yep.
those things to get 400,000 miles before a rebuild was not
Nothing.
weird, right? So
Yeah,
there's good clean ones out in the market with like, 200, 300 plus thousand
right,
miles, right?
right.
But the ones that are doing the big, big, big dollars are under 100,000 miles. The
Yeah,
good condition, real clean, under 100,000 mile fourth gen pickups. They appreciated really quickly. There's a lot of demand, and I'm a sell on those right now, right? Because
mm,
they're doing good, good, good numbers.
yeah,
So if it's got under 100,000 miles and it's a fourth gen pickup, Toyota pickup, I'm a seller.
yeah,
If it's got over 100,000 miles, I'm holding, right?
yeah,
I'm holding, because I think as the lower mileage stuff, trickles away in the market, buyers are going to go and consider the higher mileage stuff.
yeah.
So I'm a hold at 100,000 miles. What are your thoughts on that fourth gen pickup, Toyota pickup?
Yeah, right on. I mean, I think that if you can find the good gems, if you can find that under 100K and somebody reasonable, go get it. Write the check. But yeah, I see this market continuing to do well for people who have even something a little bit more used. I think you'll continue to do well and have a good investment piece over the long haul.
Cool. Again, in this class of early gen Toyota pickups and Forerunners, the fifth gen Toyota pickup, which was 89 to 97, which was right before the Tacoma, before
Mhm.
they actually gave it its own model name, just didn't call it
Yeah,
generic Toyota pickup, right?
yeah, so good. Yeah,
I think they're undervalued. I'm a buy on them.
yeah.
You a buy, sell, hold on them.
Absolute buy.
Okay.
Absolute buy. If you can find a 90s Toyota in general, a buy. If it's on the if the steering wheel is on the left side, that's a hell of a pickup.
Yep. Couldn't agree anymore. Um, Going into Forerunners that fit into this category, the early generation Toyota pickups and Forerunners. We talked about the pickups. Let's talk about Forerunners. First gen Forerunners, absolutely love them. 84 to 89. They appreciated rapidly. They
Mhm.
essentially were a Toyota pickup with a fiberglass top and a bench seat
Yeah,
and the rear glass removed. But these things have really, really appreciated rapidly.
yeah,
One to note in that first gen Forerunner, 1985 is by far the most desirable. It's a
mhm,
unicorn year. Reason it's a unicorn year is because it has the 22RE. So
mhm,
last year, the 22RE with the solid front axle,
mhm.
right?
Good
So
insight. Yeah,
85's super desirable within that. Within that realm. But again, I'm going to break these things down to mileage because again they lasted forever and a lot of them out in the market have a ton of miles. If it's
yeah,
under 100,000 miles and it's a first gen Forerunner, I'm holding it because I
yeah,
think there's a lot more upside,
yeah,
and that buyer's going to get really really picky and want the low mileage good clean stuff. If it's over 100,000 miles, borderline hold, sell it. If it's over 200,000 miles, definitely sell it because I just think that Forerunner buyer is different than the Toyota pickup buyer, and they want a cleaner, lower mileage thing, and they're going to pay. They're only going to buy it if it's exactly what they want, and they'll
yeah,
let the higher mileage stuff or lower quality stuff just pass and not even be
yeah.
a player on it. And then second gen Forerunners, the 90 to 95, completely undervalued in my opinion. This is a buy. If I'm looking for a collector, a classic Forerunner, that's what I'm buying right now.
Mm,
If I can't get my hands on an 85 first gen clean
yeah,
under 100,000 miles, I'm buying second gen Forerunner 90 to
yeah.
95. What are your thoughts there? Same?
Yeah, I think the second gen has just been underappreciated. A lot of love for the third gen, fourth gen. I own a fifth gen myself. They're just great vehicles overall and available. But I think that second gen, to your point, has been undervalued. And if you're a buyer, go get it. Go get it and hold on to it
All day long.
all day.
Other one that's what's hot moving on, and which I talked about this in the mid year market
Yeah,
update, which they came out of nowhere. Second gen Broncos, man,
killer. Yeah.
second gen Broncos. They were 2 years only,
Mhm.
78, 79. They got killed by the gas crisis. Like
Yep.
these things are just so hot.
Yep.
They just came out of nowhere. They're doing big numbers. I'm going to break down my buy, sell, hold to the quality of the vehicle because we're starting to see a lot of the realm of second gen Broncos that's out there is very wide. So
Mhm.
there's driver quality and nicely refurbished ones that are out there. I'm a buy on those. I'm a
Yeah.
buy because I still see some value there. The fully restored original ones, I'm a sell on.
Yeah.
I'm a sell because I just don't see any more. I just don't see any more
Smart
upside
play.
there. They're doing big dollars. They're doing low six figures. I just don't see too much upside for fully restored originals.
Yeah. Great time.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the last category for the second gen Bronco is the investment quality restorations that traditionally have the Coyote and Godzilla powertrain swaps. Those things are doing bonkers numbers,
Yeah.
high hundreds, low 200s. I'm a sell there all the way, all day long. I don't see them gaining more traction in the market.
Yeah, and they're absolutely killer. Those are great rigs. To your point, 2 years, tons of personality. First gen's got all the love over the past couple of years. Second gens are coming into their own. I agree. We're at a pinnacle for that market, and I don't see it really cooling down anytime too soon. But I don't think that that has as much runway to increase. The second gen Bronco, number one viewed vehicle on our platform right now. We get more inquiries about second gens than anything else, or individuals coming to us and saying, "Where the hell can I put my hands on one?" So yeah, absolutely, very hot car right now.
Um, Next one is Action Line GM 4x4 pickups. When I'm talking about Action Lines 67 to 72,
Mhm.
especially there's a big variation in value between the GMCs and the Chevrolets. The GMCs are more desirable than the Chevrolets. There was a lot less
Mhm.
of them out there.
Mhm.
But not to say any Action Line GM, 67 to 72 four-wheel drive pickup is desirable in the market right
Yeah.
now. I'm also going to break these down by the quality of the vehicle out in the market. Driver quality, nicely refurbished ones. I'm a buy on those. Fully restored original ones. They're getting a little frothy. I'm a sell there. Investment quality restorations, frame off nut and bolt restorations. Most of them all have, LS swaps,
Mhm.
some type of LS with
Right.
some, automatic transmission, whether it's a 6L80E,
Yep. Yep.
whatever it is. Those things are getting pretty frothy. We saw some of those you know, this year we saw some of those do the 250 to $350,000 realm. I'm a sell there. I just don't see any
All
more.
money. Yeah.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
with blue chip
Yeah.
vehicles being a little bit less desirable. Like you can get a driver quality one in the 30 to $40,000 realm. You can get a restored original one in the 50 to 100 depending on. But when you get to the investment quality ones that are LS swapped, man, I mean, you're talking a big
It's
bump,
wild.
250 to 350. That's a big number. Sell them all day long while there's buyers willing to pay them
Yeah.
at that point. Moving on to more GMs. which are the Chevy K5s and the GMC Jimmies. I have one of these in my own collection. I mean, I love them. I'm going to break these down by first gen, early second gen, and late second gen. Um, the first gen K5s, K5 Blazers, 69 to 72, they've been strong for a while.
Yeah.
They're getting a little thick valuation wise. How many buyers on the other end at that much higher? I'm a hold to more of a sell on the first
Mhm.
gen K5s. Second gen K5s and Jimmys are, I'm singing a different tune on. The early ones, which were 73 to 87, those are appreciating nicely. I still see some upside there. I'm a hold on those. I'm really a hold on those. Late second gen, which is what I have in my personal collection, which is 88 to 91. When they changed the
Yeah.
K moniker
Yeah.
to the V moniker, but still everybody calls them the K5, right?
Right.
So, but the late second gen, 88 to 91, I think they're still undervalued.
Yeah.
They have small block 350s, automatic trans, air conditioning. They're updated, they're comfortable, but they still have that old school look. I'm a buy all day long. So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on the action lines and the
Yeah.
K5s?
I mentioned it earlier. I love the action line. I think that that does have a lot of eyes on it right now. But I agree, it's top of market, and if you can find the right value, go for it. Um, for the K5s, I agree. Yeah, that V moniker, that's such a great if you know you know story, and that to me has just a ton of value. And you're still in that range, so smart buy by you. But yeah, the early stuff, I think it's just hit its peak. But again, I don't see it really dropping dramatically. I think it'll stabilize, and there's some really beautiful stuff out there. But couldn't agree more.
Cool. And then let's on the what's hot list. We're gonna follow it up with scouts, right?
Yeah,
So the scout effect continues, just like we saw the Bronco effect with first gen Broncos. We saw that come to roost. But the Scout effect continues. Volkswagen Group, which owns Scout, is
yep,
bringing out the new Scout EV. People that didn't even in 2 years' time, when that new vehicle lands, that new EV and International Scout lands, the Scout Volkswagen, has them and they're driving around. They're building them in South Carolina and they're on the road. There are a huge, huge faction of casual enthusiasts that doesn't even know what a Scout is. When I
right,
drive my Scout
right.
around, people are like, "That's a weird Bronco," and you're like, you got to explain to it, like,
Sure.
don't even. But as the prominence of Scouts grow, only grows bigger, and people know what they are, and the casual enthusiast starts to know what it is and wants to buy it, that's going to grow the market. And I see a lot of upside continued for scouts. The scout
Yeah,
effect continues. Let's break these down by wheelbases, right? So, right out of the gate, the scout, the early scouts, which were the 80 and the 800s, which were made from 60 to 71, they appreciated really quickly. That was predominantly led by investment quality builds.
mhm,
The 200 to $300,000 investment quality builds. There were a lot of people that were building 80s and 800s. They are. This is kind of sad. The 80s and 800s are kind of softening a bit.
okay, yep,
I'm a hold to a sell on the 80s and 800s right
mm,
now. Just because they're softening, I just think there's not as much demand. They went up real quick because the build shops were buying the donor vehicles and paying up and paying premiums for them,
mm,
building them out and then selling them for six figures. They're not as usable as
yeah,
the Scout 2, the Traveler, or the Terra. They're not as comfortable. I don't know. I'm a hold to a sell on the Scout 80s and 800s. What do you
yeah.
think there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on. It's funny those scout prices and the interest. It got so hot so fast as an alternate to Broncos. It stabilized a little bit, but it's right back out. And I love your analogy or your call to what Volkswagen has done and looking at some of the content that they're putting out right now, pre, full EV. They're doing such a great job of motivating that buyer base or motivating those enthusiasts. Their content that they're putting out is absolutely fantastic. I think they're doing a great job, and I think you're going to see a similar effect as when Ford brought back the Bronco. Is right now we know what the Scout is, but it's going to just accelerate over the next couple of months and years. So it'll be very interesting to see. But I think you're right on
The
that
more
Scout too.
limited the supply, the bigger the buyer pool, the more demand, prices are only going to go up.
Yeah,
But the putting the 80 and 800s aside, the Scout 2s, which are the standard wheelbase, built from 71 to 80, those are the short wheelbases. They've been strong for a while, especially the investment quality builds, the Anything Scouts, the Riptides, some of those builds out there. But I'm still a buy on them, man. I still think there's more to go on those Scout 2s, on the short wheelbases. The market's going to grow, demand is going to grow. There isn't a ton of them out there. There's such limited supply. These things rotted out. They never survived. They were only built for 9 years. I still see upside on the Scout 2s. But where I see, and I continue to see an immense amount of opportunity, is the longer wheelbase Travelers and the Terras. The Travelers and the Terras, that longer wheelbase, was only built from 1976 to 1980. So they were only built for 4 years. The long wheelbase is the passenger, and the Terra is the pickup truck. I added one of these to my collection this year because I see a ton of value there. I think that the Travelers and the Terras are still undervalued. I think they have more upside than the short wheelbase Scout 2s. And, I'm a huge buy on the Travelers and the Terras. They're just still undervalued. There's a ton of upside there.
Yeah.
And you have some serious players in the space that are giving them the attention they deserve. And if you look at a lot of Sean Barber's content, Sean Barber from Anything Scout, New Legend Scout, he always is talking about how the Traveler body is his absolute favorite of all the Scout bodies. You have Mike Anthony from Riptide 4x4 that is building a Traveler for his own personal collection right now. I've added one to my collection. Not to pat myself on the back, but there are players out there, some serious players that understand the market, that are building these things, that are very close to the market, that are talking about these Travelers, that are putting them into their own collections. And I'll put it to you this way. I don't think we're late to the market. I think we're really early to the market. So I'm a big buy on the Scout Travelers and the Terras, more so on the Travelers because they're more useful for family. They have that passenger compartment. What are your thoughts on there?
Yeah, I love the Traveler. I think you made a great buy for that, and it is again a vehicle that we're seeing a ton of traction for on the platform. But again, we're catering to more enthusiasts and more people. I think a little bit more in the know. So it's been popularized, and I think the sellers are catching on. But it's still a hot buy if you can get your hands on one, especially lightly refurbished. You got to go grab it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
you can get a Traveler in this market for 10, 15 grand cheaper than a comparable Scout 2.
Isn't that crazy?
So yeah, and when you have people like Sean Barber,
Yeah.
you have people like Mike Anthony,
Yeah.
that are pounding the drum on this.
Yeah.
There's
The
a
support's
reason
there.
for that. These are guys that understand the market, that are building investment quality Scouts, that are talking to clients.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
they
a
have
bit.
so many eyes that it's just such a great vehicle and a great story behind it. So absolutely agree.
So buy Scouts, especially Travelers, right?
100%.
Hold, maybe sell your 80 or 800. Sorry,
Such a
guys.
bummer. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go into what's not list. So we just finished up the what's hot list. Let's talk about what's not. First up on is I'm sounding like a broken
Big
record
stuff.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. I promise listeners, this is the last time I will talk about them. But first gen Broncos, ROW Defenders, and Toyota FJ40s, they've been on my what's not list for a long time. The market's been sliding. I've come to the realization that with these three vehicles, we have entered just the modern era of pricing. The days of, an $80,000 to $100,000, nicely restored ROW Defender, first gen Bronco, or FJ40. Those days are just gone. They're just gone. Outside of the investment quality builds, of course, right? Those days are just gone. They're really sitting in the $30,000 to $50,000 realm. So, and they haven't really moved. They came down heavy, but they haven't really moved back up. So I've come to the realization that this is just, these are the price points that are the new norm for these vehicles, right?
Yeah.
So they're not hot anymore, but they're not as not anymore. You can buy them, you can sell them, you can hold them at these price points, but don't anticipate them to go down. Don't anticipate them to come up. There's just been way too much inventory brought into the market by importers and casual restorers. So like, this is just where the market supply demand equation is, and where the pricing has settled out. So I promise I won't talk about ROW Defenders, first gen Broncos, or FJ40s anymore. This is the modern market. This is where values are. You can buy them, you can sell them, you can hold them. I'm indifferent across the board on those. What are your thoughts there on those bad boys?
Yeah, it's too bad that we have to mention them again, but yeah, I'd love an FJ40, but it's just they're just not there right now. I
Yeah, I
agree.
mean, they're good. You can buy them, you can
Yeah. Oh,
hold them, you
totally.
can sell
Yeah.
them. It's just going to be within this new world, right? It's
Right.
not there really isn't any upside. There really isn't any downside. If you like it, buy it, hold it,
Yeah.
sell it when you want to get rid of it. Like that's just where this market is. I
Yep.
will though put an asterisk on these three vehicles, and the asterisk is investment quality builds,
Mm.
right?
Right.
The investment quality builds will always have a market. They will always be desirable. And in most cases, they will appreciate. When I'm talking about investment quality builds for ROW Defenders, I'm talking about, the Helderbergs, the
Yep.
Brooklyn Coachworks, the Himalayas, right?
Yep. Yep.
Those I put on a completely different pedestal than just the average
Right.
ROW Defenders,
Right.
right? When I'm talking about first gen Broncos, the Max Lighters and the vintage Broncos,
Mhm.
like, those are a completely different caliber.
Yeah. It's a
I
different
do
animal.
still see
Yep.
some opportunity in those. They're always going to be desirable. And even when we're talking about the FJs, the Icon and FJ company builds, like they're a completely different caliber. They're a completely different market. They're a completely different buyer that is insulated from just the standard, FJ buyer, right? That the FJ buyer that's buying the nicely restored South American import isn't even considering an Icon or FJ. It's
Right.
in a completely FJ company one.
100%.
They're a completely different world.
Yep.
They trade to different.
Yeah.
It just is what it
It's
is.
like buying a watch, right? Like, there's the everybody wants a watch, but there's a Timex and then there's a Rolex. It's just a totally different buyer. I'm a
Exactly.
Timex wearer and I love it. But yeah.
That's the best way to. That's a really good analogy. Next one on what's not list. We already mentioned two-wheel drive pickups, Chevy Apaches and Task Force, Ford F1s and F100s, Dodge C and D series. Just the generation of buyer that drove this market. They're just aging. They're losing interest. They're sadly dying off. Their families are unloading them in the market. There's a lot of inventory. Just isn't the demand
Yeah.
anymore. I like them, but I'm not hot on Chevy Apaches, Task Force, Ford F1s, F100s, Dodge C and D series. I'm a sell on those bad boys, man. I am completely a sell on every one of them. As the market continues to shrink, inventory increases, prices are going to continue to fall. I'm a sell across the board on early two-wheel drives, hands down.
Yeah.
You like
Absolutely.
them? You don't like them?
No, absolutely with you, unfortunately, and I think this is also a data casualty too, right? You're seeing CKs being blended together, for instance, at that price point, but there is such a material difference between the two. So we'll see how that pans out. But I agree. I think that those are it's time to move them down the line if you have them.
And the next one on my whatnot list, which I think I might cry, I'm going to shed a tear. And I can't believe I'm even saying this, but there's an inefficiency here. NAS Land Rover Defenders, North American spec Land Rover Defenders. Just for all of our listeners out there, there's two different types of Land Rover Defenders. These are ROWs, which I mentioned before, which were the rest of the world. A lot of them were solid built. Solihull built in Europe, in the UK. There were some licensees like Santana, Autocar, Auto Moritz in Costa Rica. But that's a whole different world, a whole different conversation. So the ROWs are the rest of the world that are being imported into the US. But for a very short period of time, Land Rover did bring Defenders into the US, and those are called the NAS, the North American Spec. So actually, the NASs are not only US, they're also Canada too, but they're the North American Spec. For Defender 90, the 90-inch or the 90 wheelbase, that was 94, 95, and 97. For the 110 wheelbase, the four-door 110 wheelbase, that was 1 year only, which was 1993, and it was in one color only, Alpine white. Right, that's it. So these things have pulled back in the market, and they've pulled back pretty heavily. They're traditionally, six-figure trucks, 100 to 200,000, depending on condition and mileage. And I think this is more of a marketplace issue than an overall value, a market value issue. The reason being is we're starting to see a ton of these just get dumped on to bring a trailer. Right. A lot of NAS Defenders get dumped on to bring a trailer. This is more of an inefficiency on sellers are bringing them to the wrong marketplace and they're not doing the numbers that they deserve. If you are selling an NAS Defender on Bring a Trailer right now, you're definitely leaving money on the table, hands down. And that I can guarantee, and I'm going to tell you why. But you're leaving money on the table, and you're probably leaving somewhere around at least 20 grand on the table. Reason being is these particular trucks have a very strong enthusiast community that buy and sell these and trade these things off market, traditionally through intermediaries like myself. I have recently, in the past 2 months, worked on 2 NAS Defender transactions with another broker where he had clients that were looking to buy. I had clients that had them in their portfolio, in their collections, that would consider selling them. And the numbers that these things sold at were true market value numbers. And in some cases, almost double what they were selling at, these things are selling at on Bring a Trailer. So, I really think the softness in this market is primarily due to uneducated sellers selling in the wrong marketplace. If some guy in a Facebook group is telling you to sell your NAS Defender on Bring a Trailer, he may also tell you to go jump off a bridge. That doesn't mean you should listen to him. Okay. So NAS 90s on BAT, these things are high bidding in 40 to 60,000, and they're selling in the 60 to 70,000 realm. I'm going to puke. These things are, even with higher mileage in marginal condition, are worth well over $100,000, right? But I will say, whoever bought, and if anybody knows the person that bought the 95 Portofino Red NAS 90 with 65,000 miles on Bring a Trailer for $60,000 in July, you are my hero. Pick up the phone, call me, because I will sell that thing privately off market for at least double. Okay, so you are my hero. Buy of the century on BAT, a 65,000 mile Portofino Red NAS 90 Defender, good, clean, for $60,000. Whoever you are my hero, and you got the buy of the century, right?
Love it.
And why I know that these things are transacting in the private markets and the collector markets at much higher numbers is because I've been involved in 2 transactions recently with another specialized broker who actually just specializes in NAS Defenders. I'd love to mention his name. I've actually asked him to be on the podcast before. He's kind of private, so I don't want to mention his name, but we have, there's a 97 Arliss Blue Defender that has below 50,000 miles that him and I are working on a transaction right now, like today as we speak, that is in the hundreds, right? In the low, I'll put it to you this way, in the $100,000 to $150,000 realm, right? So that's where these things are transacting at market value, is in the private markets, not out in the open marketplaces, and especially not on BAT. Let's talk about NES 110s. These things are high bidding on and selling on BAT for $48,000 to $72,000. That just makes me sad. Just to give you an idea, NES 90s, there were 3 years. They were 94, 95, and 97.
Mm,
Roughly, there were about 6,500 brought into the country
mm.
for 94, 95, and 97 for the 90s. In comparison, they only brought, in 1993, they only brought approximately 536 NES 110s into the country, right? So there's much more limited supply. And these things should not be high bidding or selling on BAT for $58,000 to $72,000,
No way.
right? It just
Right.
makes me sad. There's inefficiency in marketplace, but I will say there was another recent transaction. So whoever bought the 91,000 mile NES 110 on BAT last month for 60,500, you are also my hero, right? Right. That truck was a good quality driver truck. It didn't have the original tweed interior. Everybody loves that original tweed interior. It had a replacement leather interior, but still buy of the century at
Yeah.
60,500. I worked on a transaction for a comparable vehicle with a little lower mileage recently, that I co-broke. That I worked on this transaction with another co-broker in the off market. I don't want to give a number, but it was in the 125 to $175,000 realm. That's where these things are doing
Wild.
doing. Yeah.
Big wild.
So there's an inefficiency there. Basically, if you're buying an NAS Defender on Bring a Trailer, you're getting a deal. If you're selling an NAS Defender on Bring a Trailer, you're getting smoked. Don't even waste your time. If you really wanted to do market value, reach out to an intermediary, a specialized intermediary like myself that can trade these things off market. That's where it's happening.
Love it.
Yep. And then to finish up real quick, I'll be quick on this one, is JDM Toyota trucks, specifically Land Cruisers 40, 60, 70, 90, 100 series and Hiluxes. Just so everybody's aware what JDM is Japanese domestic market. These are the vehicles that were built just for the Japanese domestic market. I love these things, but they're just not
Same.
doing well. Mostly just because they're right-hand drive, and Americans are done. Collectors
Yeah.
are done buying right-hand drives. These things are sitting on the market. If you hold them, if you have one in your collection right now, you own one, sell it. There's way more downside than there is upside to these things. Even though a lot of them are diesels, American collectors can look past the diesel. They can't look past the right-hand drive. Just nobody wants right-hand drive anymore.
Yeah.
And that holds true, by the way, for Defenders or any imported vehicle. Don't waste your time buying right-hand drive. There's no upside there. If you own right-hand drive collector trucks in your collection, sell them. There's more downside than there is
Yep.
upside. But if you do want an imported Toyota Land Cruiser, I will say, South America has still some decent ones, but look to the Middle East. The
Yeah.
Middle
Totally.
East, because so just like South America, which is left-hand drive, the Middle East is left-hand drive too. And the stuff coming out of the Middle East also has some pretty cool configurations, specifically ambulance doors.
Mm.
Right. So if you do want a imported Land Cruiser, whatever series it is, 40, 60, 70, 90, 100 series, check out the Middle East. They're going to be left-hand drive, and they have some cool little like intricacies. Like a lot of them are manual transmissions, especially on the 60s, the 90s and 100 series, which, here in the US, most of them are automatics. A lot of them are manuals, and they have, there's 100 series out there that have ambulance doors. So if they're right-hand drive, JDM, don't buy them if you expect any upside. If you have them right now, sell them because there's no more upside. But other note I'll give you as my parting note on these imported vehicles, I'm getting a lot of calls from prospective customers right now, or clients that say, hey, I have a imported vehicle in general and I want to sell it. My first question, oh, how long have you had it? Oh, I've had it for about 2 months right now. Oh, let me guess, you want to sell it because you bought it on import paperwork and your state isn't allowing you to title it. They're like, wow, how did you know? It's because you're the 10th person to call me this week, right? Buyer beware. If you're buying an imported vehicle, do not buy an imported vehicle on import paperwork. It has to be titled on a clean, clear US state title. Do not give anyone money, because there's a lot of scams out there too. All right. Do not give anyone money if they want to sell it to you with a bill of sale, a notarized bill of sale and import paperwork. Only buy imported vehicles that have an existing clean, clear US title, because states are getting really, really stringent. I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten in the past 3 months from people in all over the country that bought an imported truck from an importer that, they bought it on a bill of sale with import paperwork, and the importer was like, "Oh, you just have to bring it to your DMV and they'll title it right there and then." They go to their DMV and their DMV is like, "Sorry, we're not going to title this because of this, 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 this. It needs an inspection." Or, "Oh, by the way, you're missing a piece of paperwork." So they call that importer they bought it from and are like, "Hey, I need this paperwork." They're not returning phone calls, or magically the phone number is disconnected,
Yeah, right.
or they're calling them saying, "Hey, you said I could title it and I'm not able to title it on the paperwork you provided." And they're like, "Well, sounds like your problem. I got your money already." So this is why you shouldn't buy vehicles on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist in general, because that's where most of these transactions are happening. And if you get stuck with it, I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So you agree with that? You starting to see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious your take, though. I definitely agree. If it doesn't have the paperwork, you're taking a hit. What do you think that percentage, if you're ballpark, uh, difference is without just having that paperwork?
At least 50%, at least 50%, even if there
Wow.
is a buyer, because you
Right.
need to find another naive buyer that doesn't
Yeah.
know. So
Right.
you just have to, like, you were the chump that bought it that way, and now you're going to find another chump that will
Right.
buy it that way. And that chump, right? Because it's a simple Google search. That chump, I hate to say it, is probably not going to pay for it. I mean, it's just not
Yeah.
there. So buyer
Right.
beware. I won't, when I represent purchases for clients, I won't even transfer money unless I can see the title, right? It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
But let's wrap up. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
All of our
you.
listeners out there, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to our year-end market review in early January.
Can't wait.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you.